what's your secret? You got the kind of vibe that leaves one speechless. It could be model multitasking genius. Yeah, you got it all.
Well, welcome to Breakthrough Conversations with Rhoda and Company. This is a podcast, a leadership podcast, where we're going to share some authentic stories. We're going to give our guests and myself and you all the opportunity to grow and learn. And it's all about women empowerment. Notice I said storytelling. And I'm so honored to have our guest here with us today, Sylvia Owens. Welcome, Sylvia.
Thank you, Rhoda.
Thank you for
Nice to be here.
joining me and being my first guest and my future co host. I appreciate you. Sylvia has a very impressive background and career journey that she's going to share with us in a moment here. But first, Sylvia, I thought it'd be fun to share a story on how we even met and how we became friends. So, Sylvia and I, we both worked for an organization here in St. Louis, and we worked in the office building. She worked in a different department than I did. And one day we would see each other in passing, but we had never spoken. One day we took the time to get to know each other, talked in the cafeteria kitchen area for about, it felt like 2 hours. And then I got comfortable in those 2 hours. And by the end of that, I asked Sylvia, how do you feel about this certain person? And Sylvia paused and looked at me and she said, I don't know you. And I looked and she said, seriously, I don't know you, and walked away. It was in that moment that I knew I was on a mission to make you my friend. And here we are 25 years later.
Oh my goodness, 25 years.
I mean, and we don't look a day older than we were then. Um, and we're still friends, and we have gone through lots together, and we both have grown in our journey. So, Sylvia, I would love for you to share with our viewers a little bit about your background, your current role, your job title, and your journey. Kind of walk us through your career journey.
So first, I want to say my memory is blurry about all of that. No, that's a true story. Excuse me, that's a true story. And I have to say, back then I was so young, and there was an at that point in time, I would often separate,
Mhm.
my professional life and my personal life, and so that's a bit about, how who I was then and just how
Mhm.
I've grown. But currently, I'm a director and at one of the large healthcare organizations here in St. Louis. I love what I do. I lead a team of roughly about 60
Mhm.
system analysts, and
Wow.
honestly, what we do is make sure that all the 24 hospitals and multitude of clinics are able to operate, service patients, bill for their
Mhm.
services, and actually collect from the insurance company. So more software configuration. I love it. I've been doing that. Think I'm in my 18th year now.
Mhm.
But as you said, we met 25 years ago, and I've
Right.
been in healthcare about 30 years.
Mhm.
But prior to healthcare, I was an avid athlete. That's what
Mhm.
I was going to be an athlete for life. I was
Yes.
going to play basketball for until I was at least 40 years old. And when you're 20, 40 is so long,
Right.
so far away. But I love all sports.
Mhm.
I played a couple seasons professionally. I played in Spain and Europe, and
Mhm.
I've lived quite a few places. But
Mhm.
after basketball, I had to transition, and so we can talk about that later, even
Yeah.
how I got into healthcare. But I'm a director, I'm a
Mhm.
leader, I'm a mentor, and
Mhm.
I love everything that I do.
Mhm. And based on me knowing you as a friend, but also I've seen you in the workplace, and I know people who've had the great honor of working under your leadership and have grown and become leaders themselves today. I know that you're a phenomenal leader, and I know that getting to this point wasn't easier.
Uh,
It wasn't easy, and you had many barriers. Which the title of this episode is "Bouncing Beyond Barriers." You know, playing off of your football career and your experience. Kind of talk us through, like, describe for us your journey and how the glass ceilings that you've had to break along the way.
so when I think about my role in leadership, I'll take a step back. When I Athletics really is what
Mhm.
was the springboard for me when it
Mhm.
comes to leadership. I'm from East St. Louis. I grew up there in East St. Louis, and from a very early age, once I got into athletics, believe it or not, I really just started to excel really quickly.
Mhm.
I was once the captain of our basketball team in high school. I've won state championships
Mhm.
from the state of Illinois. So there are quite a few things that not only did I do, but the team did from a
Mhm.
leadership perspective that really propelled me on how to move from being a contributor to being a leader in that
Mhm.
space.
Mhm.
So my athletic background really primed me for leadership. I would say I had many mentors,
Mhm.
um, and one in particular, I worked for Washington University 30 years
Mhm.
ago, and I had an opportunity to become um, a leader, an
Mhm.
assistant supervisor. I'd only been in healthcare maybe 5 years, and then was tapped and applied for the assistant supervisor position. And from there, everything just moved forward. And when we talk about you asked me about barriers or
Yes.
how I got there. I had a lot of sponsors, Rhoda.
Mhm.
I had a lot of sponsors.
Sponsors are important.
And when I say sponsors, they may not have always been right there with me, but there were
Mhm.
so many people advocating for me.
Mhm.
And the one thing I knew how to do, even though I didn't have all the knowledge in healthcare
Mhm.
space, I knew how to win.
Mhm.
I knew about grit, determination. I knew unequivocally how to pivot, which is how I moved from playing professional basketball to healthcare and becoming a
Mhm.
leader in healthcare,
Mhm.
understanding how to pivot from where you are
Mhm.
and move in a different direction. And
Mhm.
sometimes that's not even your plan.
Right.
Life's journey takes you to that
Yes.
thing. So I had a
Yes.
lot of mentors that sponsored me to help me move from one opportunity to another, and I just build upon that,
Mhm.
build upon each of those.
And let's flip it a little bit. We talked, I mentioned barriers, and we know that especially being African American women in corporate space is not easy. But I would love to focus a little bit on some positive things like successes. What's one of your proudest moments in leadership in your journey?
I had the honor, and I call it an honor. I had the honor of hiring my mentor. And so um, I don't know many stories
Mhm.
when the mentee
Mhm.
becomes a mentor
Yes.
and the mentor becomes a mentee.
Mhm.
My mentor for many years, not just within the organization I was working in, my mentor from my days at WashU,
Mhm.
I'd always stayed connected with her. And I had an opportunity to hire her in IT.
Mhm.
And ironically, while she was very skilled and knowledgeable in the healthcare space when it comes for business
Mhm.
practices in other sectors of healthcare,
Mhm.
um, she wanted the opportunity to pivot.
Mhm.
And so I hired her for her extensive healthcare knowledge into IT,
Mhm.
which is what we were doing at that time. And electronic medical records were really, that was the wave in healthcare.
Right.
I had an opportunity to hire her with her extensive operational and healthcare knowledge into the IT space to help some of us that were more
Mhm.
technical
Mhm.
understand how to engage with the business side of
Right.
healthcare.
Right.
So it was an honor for me to be able to hire my mentor
Mhm.
and then mentor her
Mhm.
in a space that was unfamiliar to her.
Right.
And when you think about leadership, sometimes you're leading from the front,
Mhm.
you're leading from the back.
Mhm.
And oftentimes, because you have a lot of talented people on your team, you
Right.
should.
Right.
The leader sometimes is the student, just depending on the
Yes.
situation. So that's one of my proudest moments. Mentor,
Mhm.
becoming the mentee.
Mentee.
Yes,
What a full circle moment.
full circle.
That's amazing. And to your point you made earlier, it's not something that's very common that you get to do. Years ago, this person hired you. This person groomed, mentor, coach, and poured into you. And then many years later, you had the opportunity to return that favor, literally.
It was an honor,
Yes.
just an honor.
Speaking of leadership, Sylvia, how would you describe it? What does leadership mean to you in a nutshell?
Honestly, I think about, I'm going to talk about me and then I'll talk
Mm-hmm.
about leadership overarching. But for me, I don't know if I ever aspired to be a leader, but what I knew
Mm-hmm.
very early on that there was something greater that I
Mm-hmm.
aspired to do outside of East St. Louis
Mm-hmm.
and outside of my own little neighborhood.
Right.
Um, I grew up one of six raised by a single mother,
Mm-hmm.
and there are things that I would watch, I would look around me and I knew I wanted to do something differently,
Mm-hmm.
which which athletics took me on quite a large journey. Took me
Right.
quite a few places, and we'll talk about that later. But for me, leadership means using your influence, using your using your skill in building relationships,
Mhm.
and having the desire and a really firm purpose on
Mhm.
helping others become the best version of themselves.
Mhm.
And oftentimes, when you are leading, you're really building a relationship with that person because you have to identify what motivates them. Not
Yes.
everyone's motivated by the same
Mhm.
thing. And sometimes you have some in a position of leadership,
Mhm.
but they are not leading
Yes.
because no one's willing to follow them.
Mhm.
And that's what I believe you, as a leader, you're held to a higher standard. Your
Mhm.
expectations are you are in that role because
Mhm.
you need to get work done and help those in those that are reporting up to you,
Mhm.
help them become a better version of themselves. What are
Yes.
their dreams and their aspirations? How do you help them get there?
Mhm.
You're replicating, duplicating
Mhm.
all those things that others have done for you, then you're doing that for others. But most importantly, you're not a leader.
Mhm.
It's my opinion. You're not a leader unless someone's willing to follow you.
Right.
Other than that, you're just in
Right.
a role.
What a great way to describe leadership. And at the core of everything you said is human centric and
Seems-
it's about the people. And I think there's a misnomer where people think, oh, if I make it to a leadership role or get this big title where I'm leading this big team, it's all about power and influence. No, if people aren't your passion, I recommend you don't get in a leadership role because it's all about an effective legacy making leader is all about pouring into others and achieving those results and getting those things done through them.
Leadership is servant. And when you think
Mhm.
about it,
Mhm.
you are a servant to
Right.
people.
Right.
And not just those that report to you.
Right.
There are oftentimes you're leading, and there are a lot that are sitting on the sideline, may not report to you,
Right.
that are watching how you lead, what
Yes.
you say, how you do, what you
Mhm.
wear, how
Mhm.
you engage with others, not
Yes.
just your direct reports. So a leadership's responsibility oftentimes is beyond, when you look at a vertical structure in an
Correct.
organization, is beyond their
Mhm.
vertical structure.
Yes.
So leadership is about being a servant to people.
And it also comes with a great deal of responsibility. So, to the point you made, you're not just influencing those within your direct line, it's other people looking at you. You're touching and sprinkling on, and you're leaving an impression. And so, if you're not leading from an ethical, human centric, very intentional point and place, you could be making some really bad mistakes and setting a really bad example unintentionally.
You, you wrote, there are so many. There are quite a few people that I've engaged with that love the work that they're doing,
Mm-hmm.
in across the different organizations that I've worked with and for. They love the work that they're doing, but oftentimes they can suffer in silence because we all work because we love the work we're doing, but we
Mm-hmm.
also are doing it to take care of our families.
Yes.
But there are some within the workplace sometimes that's full of themselves,
Mm-hmm.
and that exude their authority because of their role to make others feel less than.
Yes.
And sometimes you have those that may not have the title will suffer in silence
Mm-hmm.
because their purpose is to take care of their family, but
Right.
they're miserable every day.
Yes.
And when Monday comes around, they're not feeling good about it. So leadership is about making sure you have some that are excited about coming back to work on
Yes.
Monday, because we spend a lot of our waking hours
At work.
working with the people at work.
At work.
So it
I
should be.
I said this to someone literally last week. This is why we're always on the same wavelength. I said, I never want to be the reason why someone is full of anxiety. They're not emotionally stable, mentally stable, because they're all nerved up about making a mistake or what is Rhoda going to do to me if I do X, Y, and Z or if I don't do X, Y, and Z. And so I say, I don't want to be the person and the reason why someone doesn't enjoy their job. I want them to be excited about, I get to go work with Rhoda
Yes.
versus I have to go work with Rhoda. What advice, Sylvia, would you give to aspiring women and specifically African American women? Because I just want to keep it real. Although women in general have challenges in the world and in America and in corporate spaces, African American women specifically. And if we can get in front of what some of these challenges are that these young women will face and they aspire to make it to leadership, we have a lot of limiting beliefs about ourselves. We have imposter syndrome, and some of these things are rightfully earned. What advice would you give to an aspiring African American leader wants to make their way up? What's some of the top, you know, two, three things you would wisdom?
I think there were years ago that we as people, especially we as Black people, we were not encouraged to be ourselves.
Mhm.
Our
Mhm.
hair may have been a problem, the way we dressed,
Mhm.
whatever could have been a problem. Sometimes we have some that are not as articulate as others, and that could be a problem.
Right.
But what I believe right now, the way the world has shifted and the embracing people as as a person, as an African American woman, you can bring your whole self to work,
Yes.
and that feels good. It
Mhm.
doesn't feel limited,
Mhm.
and you have others that are around us that are where I work now.
Mhm.
They embrace
Mhm.
diversity.
Mhm.
I have experience where maybe not so much, but where I work now, they embrace diversity,
Mhm.
and it's celebrated. So for any young woman in their field, African American woman who's desiring to one day break into leadership,
Mhm.
I said, be a student of learning.
Yes.
Don't don't be complacent.
Right.
You know, and learning doesn't necessarily mean you're in the classroom,
Mhm.
but you're curious about what's happening in your space and even outside of your spaces. What's happening in the world? Don't limit yourself to learning.
Yes.
Um, and to some of the first one, really
Mhm.
being your authentic self.
Mhm.
Of course, be professional about it, but you
Right.
can still be you.
Yes.
Those are really the two things I
Mhm.
think about.
Mhm.
And that's really, I'll tell you, Rhoda, that's freed me quite a bit.
Right.
When I can be myself,
Mhm.
you talk about the story how we met, and
Yes.
I'm opened up saying that I
Mhm.
would segregate my life.
Right.
Professionally, I kept it professional.
Mhm.
There was nothing to laugh about. I didn't
Right.
bring my family involved or talk
Mhm.
anything
Mhm.
personal. So that's how we met. What I've learned,
Mhm.
I am all these things, and it's
Yes.
okay for it to be for me to have
Yes.
all of me in the workplace, and it's it's freeing,
Yes.
honestly.
I'm glad to hear that, Sylvia. That represents growth for you as well. And to a fault, I'm probably too much of myself at work. But I just had a conversation today with a young lady. It's part of my initiative for my own growth and development. I've been meeting with different individuals of different ethnicities at work. And it's just conversational, like you and I having a conversation. Tell me more about your culture. How do you identify? What are some things in your culture that's special? And today, the young lady said, I want to know more about yours too. And she
Nice.
said, and so I started sharing about, as an African American, we're born into trauma. We're
Yes.
just we inherit that. I said, but it's so layered. And I said, so what it leads to is we're always turned on, and we feel like we have to work to this very high standard, and we can't make a mistake. And I say, and we're coming from a place of survival, but our colleague who doesn't look like us in the workplace, they see us as competition, or we're trying to one up them, etc. And we're not even thinking about them. We're just trying to survive. And I say, and how these experiences that we have in life show up in the workplace. It's because I work that way because I'm trying to make it, and I'm trying not to have to go back to where I came from. And she said, Rhoda, this was the best conversation I've had in the first quarter of the year. And she was like, and now I understand you on a deeper level, and it's making so much sense. So that's what we were talking about, how our lived experiences influence how we show up at work. So, what are your thoughts on that?
Actually, that after I was married for 20 years.
Mm-hmm.
So after my divorce, I had to I had to deal with me.
Mm-hmm.
And part of dealing with me was to address some of those things that I had
Mm-hmm.
suppressed.
Mm-hmm.
I think it was freeing when you're talking about trauma. It was really cathartic as I look to say, who am I?
Right.
What 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 do I want to be? Who am I authentically? Not who am I? Who do I want to show?
Right.
The person I want to show to the world. But I do believe that you have those traumas, you suppress them, or you try to segregate them, just as I mentioned. Um, but they're still there. So if you don't necessarily deal with them and you don't talk about them, then you're constantly in that state of survival. And I've lived that. I've lived that personally and professionally. Who I am today,
Right.
I am comfortable who I am with my talent, what I bring, how to lead. I am comfortable with speaking authentically like this with anyone.
Right.
Um, and honestly, the thing that was in me, that whole competitive piece that was in me from basketball, ironically, is still there. It shows up differently.
Right.
I go to conferences, I mentor women and men, and I share my story. I want others to avoid some of the thoughts or that they've have about themselves or they've had about themselves. Whatever I can do to help others really not experience that is what I want to do, because I am doing what I wish someone would have done for me a long time ago. I was mentored professionally, and I had a lot that poured into me and sponsored me, but I didn't have the space where others would allow me to peel back the layers and get out of survival mode.
Yes. Getting out of survival mode. It is very freeing to the point that you've made. I have two more questions I want to ask before we
Okay.
close. One is if if you could compare your leadership style to a basketball move, what would it be and why?
Well, for everyone that's listening, I love basketball. I love all sports, but I love basketball. And I was pretty good at pivoting,
Mm-hmm.
pivoting from the left side because I'm right-handed, so I would shoot a right-hand jumper. And I know that oftentimes, when the defense or the other team's studying you, they recognize that you're right-handed, that's your strength. But I love pivoting to the left and shooting right. So
Okay.
I would say pivot. And
Pivot.
that's what I've learned how to do in life, pivot.
Pivot. And life does require it, don't it? Because it comes at us fast.
It requires you to
comes at us
pivot.
fast. So, this is Breakthrough Conversations with Rhoda and Company. So, one of the questions I would like to end on with you, Sylvia, is what's one word that describes your breakthrough?
Authenticity.
Authenticity.
I had to be
Authenticity.
authentic with myself when my life was in crisis and say, who are you?
Mm-hmm.
And who do you want to present? Not who you've been presenting, but who
Right.
do you want to present?
Right.
And I like to say authenticity, my
Mm-hmm.
professional and my personal life. This is who I am.
Yeah. You show up as your whole
I
self.
show up as my whole self.
Yeah. How powerful is that?
It's freeing.
Yeah. Sylvia, thank you so much for being the very first guest on this podcast. And Sylvia, for those who are watching, if you love her voice and her story, you're going to hear more of her because we're going to be doing a joint venture together. We want to thank you, Sylvia, for taking the time to come out. I also want to leave some parting words with the viewers, and that is remember, every breakthrough starts with a conversation. So until we meet next time, remember, remove those limiting beliefs, believe in yourself, and show up as your authentic self.
Thank you so much, Rhoda. Thank you for having me.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Hey, what's your secret? You got the kind of vibe that leaves you speechless. It could be model multitasking genius. Yeah, you got it all. Hey, what's your story? A kick-ass mom and 40 under 40. A soccer practice in your high heel glory. Yeah, you do it all.